So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share my research at this very important event. And it's actually a longer research project, which lasted the past 3 years and was designed precisely to fill in a gap in the research. That is that despite the ordinariness of data practices and encounters with AI in the domestic environment, there was, especially in 2019, 2020, still little research on how families, including children, made sense of their data traces and engaged in varied data practices. So this was the motivation behind the project. And so this means that in terms of its conceptual framework, the project was designed as a non-media centric, therefore centered on the practices and imaginaries through people engaged in using digital technologies and engage in what Nick Couldry and Andreas Hepp called data relations, that is, relations that are dependent on data-driven and data-generating technologies. This kind of approach, which is consistent with mediatization research, is also essentially phenomenological, because it believes that the way people make sense and interpret their everyday life practices is still valuable to understand more complex societal processes. And it's at the same time materialist because it recognizes, it acknowledges the importance of the materiality of data infrastructures as shaping and structuring everyday practices. And also, importantly, the way that families navigate this complex datafied environment, which is their home and their everyday life more broadly, is always particular and is always situated at the dynamic interplay of the practices they engage with, the media ensemble that they use, and the communicative practices, so the communication and media repertoire that they rely upon. So this notion is what we call a figurational approach. So the understanding of families as communicative figuration, more precisely as a constellation of actors who interact based on shared frames of relevance, their culture, their system of values and norms, that engage in distinctive communicative practices that form their communication repertoire, and that they act on this communication repertoire based on both the media ensemble they can rely upon and their frame of relevance. But also, as I was going through the data and looking specifically at how families relate to their data traces and how they experience and make sense of data and data-driven technologies, the notion of Habitus popped up in my mind, because it's the habitus is also, contrary to some initial understanding, is also something that is dynamic and that comes, that emerges out of the interaction between practices and imaginaries. It's also something that enables us to make experience of a new situation based on the experience we have already gathered from past situations. And so it's an interaction between practices and our culturally more at large, and is also shaped by one's position in society be it understood in terms of class or sociodigital inequalities, but it has to do with inequalities. That's why I think it's quite relevant for what we are talking about. In terms of the methods, the data I'm going to talk about is specifically the qualitative and mixed method data we collected in a longitudinal study. Well, it was a little bit compressed, the time scale, because of COVID, but we thought it was important to conduct all the interviews face-to-face in the domestic environment because of the young age of the children involved. And so it lasted between November 2021 to January 2023 this year. And we also employed some observational methods and visual methods, like asking children to accompany the research in a video tour of their digital media that they use, and the toys that they favor. We asked parents and children in WAVE to draw a map of their homes, including where all the media are located, how they travel throughout the domestic space, and whether they belong to someone in particular. We also collected media diaries, and then in the third wave, we returned to the families with our own interpretations, visualized in form of a network maps, and we asked them to reflect upon this and to help us further refine our interpretation. The sample was based on a theoretical sampling, and we circulated digital and physical flyers in a variety of spaces, WhatsApp and Facebook parenting groups, but also call centers, hospitals. It circulated well beyond our expectations. So eventually we came up with a small sample, but still quite diverse. First of all, in terms of the family structure, so the actor constellation in a communicative figuration, with some larger families, some families who are single child, some that are single mother, and others that are single child and single mother. And these are the ranges of our children. They are also diverse in terms of the socioeconomic background, the cultural background, ethnicity, and especially in terms of their different religious orientation, which is quite important in explaining their media choices, we found out. Of course, the similarities are huge among our families. Our families are mediatized and datafied, having an average number of devices, which is around 11 and 12. Some families stand out, one upper class family and one lower class, medium class, family stand out for having a narrower media ensemble because of cultural choices rather than economic reasons. Well, there are families with broader, like 21, but on average, it's around 11 or 12 devices that the child also has access to. And 12 families also have own smart speakers, and most have access to subscription video on demand platforms like Netflix, Disney Plus, or Amazon Prime. And in terms of the practices they engage in, they favor, at this age, we are talking about children who are usually younger than 8. So it's basically about watching videos and gaming and playing video games. And so this explains why parents engage mainly in restrictive parental mediation, setting rules on what they can do and for how long they are allowed to use media, especially to use screens. But there are also a number of differences, especially in their media ensembles. We noticed a difference between higher socioeconomic families where children could benefit from a greater autonomy of use, which means that they could access the internet and online media from a variety of devices and in almost every circumstance. They also had access to paid apps and platforms, streaming platforms to a wider extent. Whereas in lower socioeconomic families, there was a tendency to buy secondhand or lower quality devices that break very often. For example, in this family, the two boys are passionate gamers, so the father bought 2 consoles, both were secondhand. They also have access to free content generally, so the same boys were playing mostly Fortnite, because it was the only game accessible for free on the Xbox, whereas they had to pay for a monthly subscription in order to access a wider variety of games. And they also played on Roblox on an old smartphone that the father lent them. But also we found some creative practices to compensate with economic difficulties, like the father engaging in tech bricolage so that everyone had their own smart TV in their own bedroom so as to watch different content simultaneously. Where they diverge most is, however, on their imaginations and their expectations around digital media. So while all families conformed to these ethos of intensive parenting and framed digital media as a form of care. So providing access to digital media is perceived and felt like a duty or an expression of good parenting. However, this aspect was less discussed in higher socioeconomic status families. It was something that is almost taken for granted, and also something that is inevitable. Therefore, they are also more likely to look for technological solution for any parenting problems they may face, like teaching a 4-year-old girl how to draw and color within the lines, or taking care of the old mother at a distance using a camera. So they're also more likely to embrace forms of caring data valence, so technological supported and surveilling acts of care. They also, conversely, in lower socioeconomic status families, there's a clearer expectation around the role of technology as either an investment in children's futures as mechanisms for future mobility, like started learning coding as providing an easier access to the labor market, but also as resources to spend in the here and now, so as symbolic tokens for children's participation in their peer group. So again, family 11, reflecting on the reason why they eventually decided to have an internet connection at home in order to have them, their children, participate in their peer group culture. So the way these practices and especially imaginaries converge, to me, gave the idea of an habitus. And especially there was an habitus that I called the dataist, borrowing Joseph Van Dijk's notion of dataism, because they are enthusiastic about the opportunities that are data-driven and algorithmic based. They embrace without any criticism the ideology of inevitability, and they express transactional understanding, as Ranjana Das called them in a recent article. So it's the argument is, yes, I'm giving off some of my private life, some of my data, but I have way more to benefit from this because of how data-driven technologies and choices will inform our future choices and do some extra work on our behalf. It is not that they are immune from misunderstandings or parked understandings. For example, they don't really understand what we mean by children's data. They think it's more related to personal information like name and surname, age. And so because all the services and apps that their children access are actually do not actually demand children's data, but parents' data, they believe that no data at all is collected, or little data is collected from their children. And also, more importantly, that these data are in a way valueless for industry. Because of their general character. They have no not clear understanding of how profiling also works for children. The logic of inevitability often translates into the I have nothing to hide argument. So, for example, in this family, when asked about whether they were concerned for Alexa being always on in the living room, we have nothing to hide. If they want to listen to an ordinary family having arguments or an ordinary couple having arguments, then let's do it. And as I said, this explains why they are more eager to engage in caring data valence practices, like, for example, using a smartwatch to track the child in very in very crowded public places for fear of missing her. The opposite habitus is more prevalent in middle class and lower class families. And again, the notion of inevitability plays a part there, but it is characterized more by a digital resignation. The fact that the feeling of being powerless in front of data valence and the possibility of being always tracked and monitored and profiled. This translates into occasional, non-consistent and contradictory attempts at protecting privacy and limiting datafication. And it also sometimes results in practices that are actually counterproductive and that expose especially the children to more profiling and to more tracking, like making up the data and pretending the child is older, and so that even more data are collected of them when they play online. And again, in relation to privacy specifically, they are sort of resigned, as I said, but also in a way immune and uncommitted to protect their privacy anymore. They know what they should do, but they end up not doing it anyway. And finally, we also found, which is quite marginal, but we found in a couple of families a sort of digital asceticism, I would call. So the conscious withdrawal from data relations in order to protect themselves and their own children. So this is typically parents who work online a lot, but then refrain from using technologies at home. And there are a few screens in their homes, and they're also very careful not using mobile phones when their children are present. The children themselves do not watch much television, do not play games online. The exceptions were, of course, during the lockdowns. So when the parents had to work from home and keep the children occupied. So this is still a very much a work in progress, but I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to receiving your comments, and you can write me an email as fair, and also follow the project for future presentation. Thank you.